I got this problem. Apparently, I'm not actually Jewish enough for Hitler. There's no way to verify or authenticate that I am actually Jewish enough for Hitler. Now, I could allow for a seeding of the complete offense of how it was that it came to be, that I was considered to be desirable by the Mormons. And I could go through with what has already been presented to me and just get it out of my head that all that other stuff that I thought I got from the ancestors or that I got from my time of private reflection has any more validity than pretty much every other kind of religious indoctrination program that has been attempted in the stead of giving me a true process by which I can enjoy a spiritual commitment. I could. What's it take? I got the books, they were translated into English. I got tons of books here. What do you want? What do you want, huh? You know, my dad had 666 in his social security number. Somebody thought it was a good idea that when my father was given his social security number to code it to 666. And they just kept racketing me and stealing my shit and ignoring me until finally it got to the time in the pipeline where I literally got a 666 on my birth certificate. Yeah, right? But don't worry, because if I was supposed to be sacrificed to Satan so that some sort of religious tradition could make their blood offering, well, I got every fucking book you need right here. I got the Babylonian Talmud, I got Congregation of the Sisters of Charity of the Immaculate Word of San Antonio, Texas. I got Professor Rahumuddin Muhatta Imam Malik. I got the Book of Mormon. I even got the goddamn Soviet legal system. There's nothing more satanic than that, except for this guy. You know, he was German and he was Jewish. I'm sure they got him mixed up all the time. Paul Warburg describes the origins of the Federal Reserve System. 1930. What you really fucking want is for me to shut up and give you attractive coinage. Let's see what he said. Individualism in banking demanded that everybody should be free to have his own individual fling, while the subsequent disaster was the common property of all, engulfing the innocent with the guilty. At times, when excesses had not gone too far, the unwillingness and inability of the banks to make further loans, which might express itself in interest charges of from 50% to 100% for call loans, would bring about a contraction. At times, the very existence of such rates would tend to broadcast the critical underlying conditions and precipitate the panic that it was hoped such prohibitive rates would forestall. Everybody will agree today that it would be difficult to imagine a banking system more cruel and more inefficient than that prevailing in the United States at the beginning of the 20th century. A system which, instead of scientifically regulating the flow of credit and money so as to secure the greatest possible stability, was designed automatically to produce instability. A system which permitted expansion and contraction to go unhampered to their very extremes. A system which knew no better way to turn the ebbing tide of credit than to lay the country waste, making its ruins an attractive shopping place for domestic and foreign wreckers and bargain hunters. Get out your coupons. It is very important, however, to realize how little the people of that period understood the fundamental organic defects of their banking system. American public opinion was strongly inclined to dispose of the question by laying the blame for these difficulties upon the selfish and reckless management of corporations, on over-speculation, the greed of banks, or the wily practices of Wall Street. To a person trained under the central banking system of European countries, such conditions seemed bewildering and strange. To him, American banking methods appeared to do violence to almost every banking tenet held sacred in the Old World. In Europe, reserves were centralized, note issues were elastic, and commercial paper permitting of immediate sale formed the quickest asset of the banks. In Europe, the bill market formed the most important field in which banks sought to employ their liquid funds, while a certain limited portion of their secondary reserves was invested on the stock exchanges in fortnightly or monthly loans under the term settlement system generally prevailing on European stock exchanges instead of a daily settlement system such as that in vogue with us. In the United States, the note issue based on government bonds was inelastic, gold reserves were decentralized, and investments in unsaleable single-name commercial paper were locking up the funds of the banks, while call loans on the stock exchange constituted their chief liquid asset. The idea of a central banking system being anathema to all, attempts to obtain general relief centered in proposals for the creation of more currency to be issued by thousands of individual banks. What the general state of mind was with regard to the banking problem may well be illustrated by a conversation I had shortly after my arrival. In order to clarify the problem as it had arisen in my mind, I had ventured to set down in a short memorandum the cardinal defects of our system as I saw them. I compared our methods with those employed in Europe and pointed out the direction in which I believed the remedy might be found. I stressed the fact, however, that aside from psychological and political resistance, any attempt to establish in the United States a banking system more nearly approaching the European models would meet a serious and almost insuperable obstacle in the fact that, while central banking systems in Europe were largely built upon a foundation of modern commercial paper and bankers' acceptances, these modern forms of paper were then non-existent in the United States, and that, therefore, progress could be achieved only by slow degrees. This memorandum was shown to Mr. Jacob H. Schiff, then the senior partner of the banking firm of Kuhn, Loeb and Company, of which I had lately become a member. Mr. Schiff read the paper with interest and told me what afterwards he often repeated, that while theoretically he agreed with most of the thoughts expressed, he believed that I was misjudging the psychology of the American people, who would never, he said, accept any system approaching a central bank. But since he always appreciated earnest efforts on the part of his juniors and never missed an opportunity of encouraging them, he suggested that I let him show the papers confidentially to two of his friends. One of these was Mr. James A. Stillman, president of the National City Bank of New York. It was significant, however, of the atmosphere in which we were then living that Mr. Schiff warned me to be careful not to have the memorandum go any further, lest, having just arrived from Europe, I might impair my standing in the banking community by creating the impression I was urging a system which, in the final analysis, would have to be built around a central banking organization. I gladly accepted Mr. Schiff's suggestion, and a few days afterward I found Mr. Stillman standing over my desk. He looked at me silently, as was his wont, through his half-closed, heavy dark eyes. "How was the great international financier?" he asked with friendly sarcasm. He then added, "Warburg, don't you think the City Bank has done pretty well?" I replied, "Yes, Mr. Stillman, extraordinarily well." He then said, "Why not leave things alone?" It was not without hesitation that I replied, "Your bank is so big and so powerful, Mr. Stillman, that when the next panic comes, you will wish your responsibilities were smaller." At this, Mr. Stillman told me I was entirely wrong, that I had the mistaken notion that Europe's banking methods were the most advanced, while, as a matter of fact, American methods represented an improvement upon and an evolution of the European system, America having already discarded its central bank. He had no doubt that progress would have to be sought, not by copying European methods, but by elaborating our own. 4 years later, in the midst of the panic, I found Mr. Stillman once more standing over my desk, and when I looked up, he asked, "Warburg, where is your paper?" I said to him, "Too late now, Mr. Stillman. What has to be done cannot be done in a hurry. If reform is to be secured, it will take years of educational work to bring it about." This incident is related for the sole purpose of showing the status of banking and business opinion in those far-off days. What Mr. Stillman had said was typically the general attitude then prevailing. I'm more interested in what Mr. Schiff has been saying, that everybody else has been letting him say, while the rest of us are centrally banked for fucking who? Literally. Centrally fucking banked for fucking who? Are these European standards? Would these be something that might be considered somebody else's commercial banking model? You know, the one that every fucking time the Central Bank of London has to give its goddamn fucking perspective on Brexit, we have to talk about fucking submarines, and I have to spend all fucking night with somebody telling me about how I have to kill the fucking Jew and then accept Jesus into my fucking heart so the next fucking day